You probably think you are in complete control of your decisions and thoughts. But how often are they guided by something else? Something you don't even notice occurring deep within your mind. Here are 21 cognitive mind traps, fallacies, biases, and other phenomena that exist within your brain. Strange things that are hardwired into all human minds. You may go through your entire life, or well into adulthood, completely unaware that you are carrying around these thinking errors and mental shortcuts that influence your day-to-day thinking. You can't turn them off or delete them from your brain, but being one of the few people who can notice when they arise in your mind and knowing the situations where they are likely to affect your decision-making is one of the first steps to becoming a more thoughtful and rational thinker. This two-part series is mainly inspired by the works of Nobel Prize-winning psychologist Daniel Dennett. Kahneman, in his amazing book Thinking Fast and Slow, a fox sneaked up to a vine, stared intently at the juicy, purple, overripe grapes. He tried to reach the grapes, but they were too high. Frustrated, he tried again. He launched himself upward, but came no closer to the fruit. He leapt for a third time, landing hard with a thud. Still no grapes? The fox turned up his nose. I don't care. They're just sour grapes anyway. He walked back into the forest. This is one of Aesop's fables, and also where we get the term sour grapes from. The fox had three choices. Get the grapes, admit he wasn't smart or skilled enough to obtain the grapes, or reinterpret the situation retrospectively. Put simply, create a new belief that conflicts with the first belief. When we choose option 3 and hold two conflicting beliefs, that is an example of cognitive dissonance. If you interview for a job but someone else gets it, instead of reasoning that the other person was better, you tell yourself that the job wasn't good anyway, or that the interviewer was unfair. When people can't get what they want, they often convince themselves it isn't what they wanted anyway. You think all rich people are greedy and evil, but you also want to be rich. The dissonance leads to discomfort, mental stress, and anxiety. If the dissonance grows more intense, it can lead to depression. If you notice dissonance, you need to choose one. As Rolf Dobelli says, you can play the clever fox all you want, but you'll never get the grapes that way. You arrive 5 minutes late to the office and feel like everyone is judging you. It's your first day at the gym and you feel like everyone is watching you. You spill a small amount of sauce on your shirt and feel so embarrassed because you think the whole party is going to notice. The spotlight effect is the phenomenon in which people tend to believe they are being observed more than they actually are. People are seldom interested in you and your actions as much as you think, so do yourself a favor, stop overestimating how much people are observing you, and reduce the anxiety that is probably just the result of the spotlight effect. Whenever we have to guess something, let's say the population of Russia, we use anchors. Starting with something we know for sure to be true, okay? It must be greater than 1, must be less than 7 billion, and is less than the population of China. We take these anchors and then explore unfamiliar territory. Unfortunately, we rely on anchors even when unnecessary. Take a moment to pause and look at these questions. Is the height of the tallest redwood tree more or less than 1,200 feet? What is your best guess about the height of the tallest redwood? If we asked Group A these two questions and Group B similar ones, we would consistently get very different answers due to the anchoring effect. But the anchoring effect doesn't only apply to numbers that seem informative, like the tree example. According to Kahneman, anchors that are clearly random can be just as influential as potentially informative ones. An experiment was conducted with German judges averaging 15 years of experience. Each judge heard a description of a shoplifting woman, and they rolled loaded dice that only added up to 3 or 9. After the dice stopped, they were asked to sentence her. Judges who rolled a 9 gave her an average of 8 months. Those who rolled a 3 gave her 5 months. Researchers found the anchoring effect influenced their judgments. Numerous studies using arbitrary numbers like phone digits or social security numbers confirmed our anchoring bias. In sales and negotiations, anchors are constantly used. Some people will exploit the anchoring effect against you. The car salesman starts with a high price, so the actual target seems like a bargain. The $150 dress at the store S entrance sets the anchor for the $50 dress on sale at the back. Online stores, salary talks, and real estate deals are playgrounds for the anchoring effect. It's one of our strongest biases. You can't turn it off, but you can remind yourself of your vulnerability and proactively set your own anchors before entering sales or negotiation scenarios. They sent us their asking price for the house. Let's not let it sway us. Set it aside. Let's conduct our own research and arrive at our number. Our goal in this negotiation is to move first and anchor them to this figure. What do you think about Alan and Ben? Alan is intelligent, industrious, impulsive, critical, stubborn, envious. Ben is envious, stubborn, critical, impulsive, industrious, intelligent. If you're like most people, you see Alan in a more positive light than Ben, even though the traits mentioned are exactly the same. When it comes to the halo effect, sequence matters. More weight is given to the first piece of information we receive. The first piece of information helps us quickly create a story about the person or situation in our minds. Sure, Alan is stubborn and envious, but that's because he's intelligent and wants to win in business. Yes, Ben is intelligent, but he uses that intelligence in envious ways. The halo effect occurs when a single aspect of a person or thing determines and overshadows how we see the full picture. When you start dating someone, both parties in the relationship are on their best behavior. You begin to develop a halo of positive thoughts around this person. Small traits that you dislike might start to appear. They often go unnoticed because the halo of the positive emotions and initial impressions blinds out any negatives. The honeymoon phase of a relationship is often when the halo effect influences your judgment the most. If you learn that someone graduated from a prestigious university, the halo effect distorts all other traits you attribute to that person without evidence. Bernie Madoff was the darling of Wall Street, a legendary investor. The impressive returns and reputation of his company created a halo that made people conclude his company must be trustworthy. The halo overshadowed the numbers that didn't add up and the fact that he was operating the largest Ponzi scheme in history. Numerous studies have shown that attractive people are automatically perceived as kinder, more honest, and more intelligent. The halo effect can also be found in schools. If a student answers to essay questions and the teacher gives a high grade for the first essay, they are prone to subconsciously give more weight to the second essay as well, and vice versa for low grades. In the workplace, open discussions and meetings often amplify the halo effect. Daniel Kahneman argues, in Thinking Fast and Slow, that it's better to gather independent judgments on a topic from everyone in the group before discussing it, because the opinions of the first people to speak are often given disproportionate weight, especially if the boss speaks first. Modern research suggests that the old saying, "First impressions last," is true. After meeting someone for the first time, your judgment about that person can influence you for a long time. You jump to conclusions, and your perception of true characteristics is distorted by the halo effect. To combat this, try to move beyond the first appearance of someone or something and to correlate error. Remember, your brain is trying to help by creating the most complete story possible with limited information. Problem is that these shortcut stories are often inaccurate compared to reality. He knows nothing about her personality. He's only evaluating her appearance. He's succumbing to the halo effect. This new applicant graduated from Harvard. She doesn't have experience in a similar position, but I think we should interview her anyway. Let us gather independent ideas on this topic before the meeting. I don't want my ideas to influence the group. 3 times a coin is flipped and lands on heads each time, let us say. Someone forces you to wager thousands of dollars of your own money on the next toss. Would you bet on heads or tails? If you think like most people, you will almost always choose tails, although heads is equally likely. Right. Why? We believe in some kind of balancing force in the universe. If we ask people which sequence is more probable, most would pick the top sequence. But both sequences are equally probable. We generally underestimate the likelihood of streaks occurring by chance. This leads us to believe that something needs to change due to the gambler's fallacy. Lazy. However, there is no such balancing force. The coin cannot remember that it landed on heads 3 times in a row, and the roulette ball cannot remember that it just landed on black. Casinos love the gambler-s fallacy because it creates the illusion in the gambler-s mind that they can predict where the balance, the dice or roulette wheel, will go next. This fallacy applies anywhere there's a sequence of decisions. That awkward feeling you get when you VA marked 5 C's in a row on a multiple choice exam is this fallacy at work. A University of Chicago review found that asylum judges were 19% less likely to approve an asylum seeker if they had just approved the previous two. Malone applicants were more likely to be approved if the two prior applicants were rejected and more likely to be rejected if the two prior applications were approved. Similar findings were also observed with baseball umpires. Take a closer look at independent and interdependent events around you. Independent events are not influenced by balancing forces of nature. If you see leather seats for $3,000, they may seem a little expensive. If you're buying an $80,000 car, on the other hand, the $3,000 upgrade feels almost insignificant. Research shows that people will walk an extra 10 minutes if it means saving $10 on food. However, almost no one will walk 10 minutes to save $10 on a $1,000 suit. It's easy to think something is attractive, large, or expensive when it's placed next to something ugly, small, or cheap. Absolute judgments can be difficult to make. Try to catch yourself the next time you go shopping to see if your purchasing decisions are being influenced by the contrast effect. You have an existing belief about something. You go in search of evidence that supports that belief, reinforcing it further. And you continue this cycle, continuing to reinforce the belief. If you encounter evidence that doesn't support your belief, you filter it out, and your brain actively forgets it after a short period of time. This is confirmation bias. The tendency to interpret new information so that it aligns with our existing theories and beliefs. Our brains are wired to maintain beliefs, not easily accept new ones, because accepting new beliefs is psychologically exhausting, like the scientific method, where you form a hypothesis, gather evidence, and test it. Confirmation bias encourages us to seek only confirming evidence. John begins with a simple theory or belief. He turns to Google, subconsciously searching for the first information that confirms his belief and ignoring the rest. Philosophers of science would tell us to try to refute the hypothesis. Rarely do people actively seek disconfirming evidence. To make matters worse, platforms now tailor content to personal interests and browsing history. Supercharging confirmation bias on a mass scale, we find ourselves in echo chambers, reinforcing our convictions and making confirmation bias stronger. The more you conform facts to fit your beliefs, the narrower your perspective becomes, until that narrow reality is all you can see. Confirmation bias is the genesis of the "I'm always right" ego, especially in political discourse. What planet are they living on? They must be living in an alternate reality. I'm completely right about everything. Look at all the facts on my side. As opposing perspectives become narrower, discourse about facts that are interpreted differently becomes nearly impossible, because both sides see evidence through the lens of their theories and only look for what confirms their existing beliefs. According to Daniel Kahneman, a reliable way to make people believe in falsehoods is frequent repetition, because familiarity is not easily distinguished from truth. When people hear the same thing repeated enough times, facts may as well go out the window. Echo chambers are the engines for frequent repetition and dissemination of ideas. The same ideas are shared, liked, and repeated, and any new beliefs are quickly shut down. All divergent thinking and opinions begin to disappear. There's no way to eliminate confirmation bias, only ways to reduce its effect. First, become aware this mind trap exists. If time allows reflection, try to think gray. If you truly want to become an independent thinker, explore gray areas and expand beyond the hive mind of the group. Get your information from various sources and avoid being influenced into a belief because others are telling you to think that way, or it's been repeated so often that you accept it as truth. Confirmation bias narrows perspectives, widen yours. In most cases, objective facts lie somewhere in between, in the gray area. You buy a certain brand of car, and all of a sudden, you start seeing that car everywhere, whereas you didn't in the past. When you learn a new word or concept, suddenly you start seeing it everywhere in your life. Begin to think, wow, this is weird. How is it possible? I've never seen this word in my life. And now I've seen it 3 times this week. The Baader-Meinhof phenomenon is an illusion in which, after noticing something for the first time, there's a tendency to notice it more frequently. It occurs when increased awareness of something creates the illusion that it's appearing more often. This phenomenon is amplified by 2 other biases: the recency effect, which inflates the importance of recent stimuli, and confirmation bias, which convinces your mind these odd coincidences are meaningful and perpetuates your search for further proof. Essentially, our brains are expert pattern detection machines, constantly seeking meaning in data. What's remarkable are all the patterns and stimuli bombarding you daily. Yet your brain filters most of them out because they're not within your focus. We only notice what we're actively looking for. In reality, you've likely encountered that word or car numerous times, but your mind simply wasn't paying attention. We almost always remember incomplete tasks, yet completed ones slip from memory effortlessly. To put it simply, incomplete tasks linger in our minds far longer than completed ones. Initially, it was believed that the only way to counteract the Zeigarnik effect was to finish the task at hand. However, further research revealed that merely having or jotting down a plan to complete the task was sufficient to halt the effect. So if you find yourself lying awake at night, stressed about unfinished tasks, grab a pen and paper and quickly outline a plan to tackle them. Getting these tasks out of your head and onto paper combats this effect and brings mental relief. Imagine you've spent $50 on a ticket to a concert. On the day of the event, a massive storm rolls in, and driving to the venue would be dangerous. Despite the risks, you decide to go anyway because you've already paid for the ticket. This is the sunk cost fallacy, the idea that we continue investing time, money, or effort into something simply because we've already invested in it, even when it no longer makes sense. The sunk cost fallacy affects everything from personal relationships to business decisions. For example, you might stay in a failing relationship because you've invested too much time, or continue funding a project that's clearly not working because of the resources already spent. To combat this, remind yourself that past investments cannot be recovered. Focus on the present and future benefits rather than what's already been lost. When asked whether shark attacks or car accidents are more deadly, most people say shark attacks. This is because vivid, memorable events like shark attacks shown in movies or news stories are more easily recalled than mundane, but statistically significant events, like car accidents. The availability heuristic is our tendency to overestimate the likelihood of events based on how easily examples come to mind. Rare but dramatic incidents, like plane crashes or terrorist attacks, dominate our perception of risk, even though statistically safer activities, like driving, pose a greater threat. To avoid falling prey to this bias, rely on data and statistics rather than gut feelings or anecdotal evidence. Imagine you re-offered a bet. You can either win $100 or lose $100 with equal odds. Most people will decline the bet, even though the expected value is neutral. Why? Because losses loom larger than gains. Loss aversion is the tendency to prefer avoiding losses over acquiring equivalent gains. Studies show that the pain of losing is psychologically about twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining. This bias influences everything from financial decisions to everyday choices. For example, you might hold on to a losing stock longer than you should, hoping to avoid realizing the loss, even if selling would be the rational choice. Understanding loss aversion can help you make more balanced decisions by recognizing when fear of loss is clouding your judgment. Have you ever noticed how some people with minimal knowledge in a field believe they're experts? This is the Dunning-Kruger effect, an overestimation of one's abilities due to a lack of self-awareness. On the flip side, highly competent individuals often underestimate their skills, assuming tasks that are easy for them are equally easy for others. This cognitive bias can lead to overconfidence in unskilled individuals and imposter syndrome in skilled ones. To mitigate its effects, seek feedback and remain open to learning. Imagine you own a mug that you bought for $5. If someone offers you $10 for it, you might refuse, even though you'd never pay that much for a similar mug. This is the endowment effect, the tendency to overvalue things simply because we own them. Once we possess something, we attach emotional significance to it, making it harder to part with. This bias is particularly evident in negotiations, where sellers demand higher prices than buyers are willing to pay. Recognizing the endowment effect can help you make more rational decisions about possessions and transactions. How information is presented can drastically influence your decisions. For example, if a surgical procedure has a 90% survival rate, It sounds much more appealing than one with a 10% mortality rate, even though both statements mean the same thing. The framing effect shows how susceptible we are to language and context. Advertisers, politicians, and marketers exploit this bias to sway opinions and behaviors. To resist the framing effect, focus on the underlying facts rather than how they're presented. If everyone around you starts adopting a trend, you're more likely to join in even if it doesn't align with your personal preferences. This is the bandwagon effect, where we conform to group behavior to fit in or avoid standing out. Social media amplifies this bias, as likes, shares, and comments create a feedback loop that reinforces popular opinions. To avoid falling into this trap, question whether your actions reflect your true beliefs or simply a desire to conform. People often overestimate their knowledge, skills, or ability to predict outcomes. For instance, surveys show that most drivers believe they're above average, which is statistically impossible. The overconfidence effect can lead to poor decision-making as individuals take unnecessary risks or fail to prepare adequately. To counteract it, regularly assess your performance and seek constructive criticism. Have you ever underestimated how long a project would take, only to miss deadlines repeatedly? This is the planning fallacy, the tendency to underestimate the time, cost, or risks involved in future tasks. Even when aware of past failures, we remain overly optimistic about our ability to complete tasks efficiently. Breaking projects into smaller steps and setting realistic timelines can help mitigate this bias. Negative experiences tend to have a stronger impact than positive ones. For example, a single criticism can overshadow multiple compliments. The negativity bias helped our ancestors survive by prioritizing threats over rewards. However, in modern life, it can lead to excessive worry or pessimism. Practicing gratitude and focusing on positive experiences can help balance this bias. We often assume that others share our beliefs, preferences, or behaviors. For instance, if you dislike a particular food, you might mistakenly believe most people feel the same way. The false consensus effect stems from our need to validate our viewpoints. To avoid this bias, actively seek diverse perspectives and challenge your assumptions. By understanding these 21 mind traps, you can become more aware of how your brain processes information and makes decisions. While you can't eliminate these biases entirely, recognizing them is the first step toward thinking more critically and rationally.